Hello again, guys. It's been quite a while since I last made a video. I haven't really had much to talk about, to be honest, but something did come up today which I thought would be worth a shout, just a short video. And it's to do with counterpoint, ish. So I was talking about harmony with one of my students, and I thought it'd be useful to make maybe a little companion video for the stuff we're covering in the lesson. But it might also be useful for anyone else watching who wants to know a little bit more about how to get better results out of their chords and how to make them sound a bit more musical and have a bit more of a direction. So one of the exercises that we do is we write out a scale. So just for the sake of simplicity, I've written out C major. And what we want to do is harmonize every note. So this will be our baseline, and that's kind of critical. We don't want to change the baseline at all. We just want all these notes to be as they are. And then we're just going to fill in the rest of the chords. Now, you could do this just with triads. So say I've got C major, then D minor, and then E minor, F major. Now this would sound a bit boring, to be honest. Sounds like a kid playing on a piano or something. Not really preferable. So what we want to think about is actually how we can smooth the chords out. And that will involve making sure that the bass is not always playing the root note of the chord. Now, if that's a new term for you, the root note is effectively the name that we give the chord. So say if you've got a C major chord, that means that the chord is built on thirds on top of the note C. So C is the bottom note, and that would be the root. But you don't always have to have the root at the bottom. You can have one of the other notes in the chord at the bottom in the bass line, and that would constitute what we call an inversion chord. And there are various different inversions. They're just fancy names that we give to chords that have one or other different notes in the bass. So say for instance, if I have this E here, well, our C major chord has C, E, and G in it. So let's build a C major chord on top of this E. So we've got C and G and E in the bottom. Well, this is what we call a first inversion C major chord. And the reason being is that it's got the third of it in the third of the chord in the bass. Now, I know first and third, and it gets all a bit confusing terminology-wise. But the main reason being is that it's the first in the series of inversions that we might talk about. So the next one would be if I had the G in the bass, which is the next note of the C major chord. So if we remember, we've got C, E, and G. If I built a C major chord on top of this, so added a C and an E, this would be called a second inversion C major chord. The reason being is that it's the next note after E in the series of notes in a C major chord, and that's in the bass now. So we have a root position chord, the one that's got C in the bass. The name of the chord is in the bass. Then we've got first inversion, which is the third, which is the next note up. And then we have the second inversion, which is the next note up from that. And you can see how this might go. So say if we had the seventh of the chord, if we're doing extended chords, so took this B, and then built a C major seventh chord on top of that, that would be a third inversion, and on and on and on. So the main point I'm trying to get across is that you don't always have to have C in the bottom, in the bass, in order to have a C major chord, or whatever C kind of chord you're doing. So this means that we can write actually a melody in the bass line, a nice line that has direction and has feel to it. And that doesn't mean that we have to use just the chords that the notes say. We can use a whole bunch of more interesting chords and come up with more interesting progressions. So in the exercise, what we do is we figure out a whole bunch of chords we can harmonize this scale with. And so what that'll involve is asking oneself what chords include, in this case, C. So we're going to stick to the key of C major for now. We're going to get to the next bit where we start borrowing chords from other keys in a second. But I want to think first, what other chords is C featured in? Or another way to phrase that is, which chord is C the third of? Or perhaps you could say, which chord is C the fifth of? So to do that, I'd say C is the third of A minor, which is in the key of C. And it's also the fifth of F major. So I've got those chords I could choose from, as well as the C major chord. I'm going to start with C major, just because this is the starting point of our scale, and fill in the other two notes of the chord. But next time, I don't like the triads going up just in step. I like to have a bit more smooth movement going on. So now I'm going to use an inversion chord. I've got a D here. D, what is that? D is the third of something and the fifth of something else. So D is the third of B diminished, which would be B, D, and F. But I don't really want that chord because it doesn't sound so great at the moment. But it's also the fifth of a G major chord. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write the other notes in G major, which is B and G. And then we've got E here. E is the third of C major, and it's the fifth of A minor. We've just had C major, so let's just go to A minor. So we've got an A there, and we'll have a C. And then we've got F coming in the bass, and so yada, 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 you get the picture. You fill in the notes of all the possible chords that you could use, and you choose which ones you want. So I'm going to go for F major here. And then what do we have? We have a G. So maybe let's have another C chord, because G is part of C, C, E, G. And then we have A, so we can have another F major chord. And we've got a B, so we can have a G and a D. And then back to C major. So that would sound like this. So that's already way more interesting, even if it's a bit sort of childish sounding, perhaps. But it's way more interesting than just having the triads going up and up and up. So that's what it is like if we just use the chords in the key. But there's way more chords available to us than just those chords in the key. So what we can ask ourselves is, let's go back to our note C at the very beginning. So C is the minor third of A minor. It's also the fifth of F major. But there are chords outside of C major that we can pick by saying C is the major third of A flat major. It's also the fifth of F minor. You could even stretch it and say it's the seventh of D flat major seventh. So there's way more chords available. So let's take it out there a little bit now. And let's not start on C major. Let's start on F minor. Let's go for that. So I'm going to have an A flat. And then an F. And then we have a D coming. So D could be B flat major. D is the major third of the B flat major chord. So let's just go for that. And then we've got an E. So let's go for C chord now. C first inversion. And then we got F. Okay, so F, we could just have an F major chord. We could have an F minor chord. We started with F minor. Maybe let's do something even more interesting. Let's go for a D flat major chord. Because F is the major third of a D flat major chord. So I'll have a D flat, an A flat, which is the tonic and the fifth of a D flat major chord. And then we have G, so maybe we can have C. Should we go for C minor, perhaps? I have no idea how this is going to sound. I'm just doing this completely theoretically at the moment. So now we have an A, which is definitely different to all of these other notes that we've had. A is the major 6 of the scale, which is a weird note. So let's play around with this. Maybe we could have, I don't know, like a D7 chord, which is A is the 5th of a D7 chord. So we can have a F sharp and a C. Let's add a flat 9th in there, just because we're going crazy now. And then we have B. Let's have a G major chord. And then go back to C again. This is probably going to sound a bit crazy, but all these chords work with the bass line that's just simply a C major scale. Actually, it didn't sound half bad. I'm pretty sure I've heard that in some classical piece or something like that. So, yeah, all those chords work. And all we need to do is just ask ourselves, when looking at a bass note, what other chords have that note in other than just the chord itself? Like, I've highlighted D there. So I could think D, B diminished, B minor, B flat major. I could have G minor, G major. I could have F sharp augmented. I could have all sorts of different jazz chord voicings or whatever when it gets into really chromatic stuff. It's up to you. But yeah, if you want to practice this, just write out a scale. Start with C major. It's the simplest key. And then fill in the other chords that you could possibly want. And so ask yourself, say if I highlighted C. C is the root of C major, but it's also the 3rd of what? A minor. It's also the 5th of F major. And you could also say it's the major 3rd of A flat. It's the 5th of F minor. And all sorts of things like that. So the choice is yours. Anyhow, this was a quick introduction to sort of some basic principles of counterpoint. It's definitely not the whole story, but hopefully this is helpful. So until next time, enjoy and keep writing great music and all that jazz. I'll see you in the next one.